call this meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. And our first agenda item is the approval of the minutes from the June 20th session.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
And then
Any discussion?
No.
Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right. And our next agenda item is number 3, the verbal certification of payroll for 6/16, 6/30, and 7/14.
You're correct.
And you'll just say whether or not the payroll for those dates is correct.
Correct.
Thank you. And then we can move on to item 4. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Item 4, we'll start with police department business and our report.
Okay, got somewhat a redacted version this month of the normal statistics we provide. This is a combination of people being on vacation that normally compile this and us trying to kind of fine tune this. Leading off with the thing that is concerning us most is this continued increase in calls for service. It's a 43.1% increase so far in 2023. Now, some of that is absorbed with some traffic stops, but that only brings it down to about the 35th percentile. So we're still 35% up from where we were last year to date if you factor out just the increase in traffic stops. And we do have a slide on that. Really no rhyme, rhythm, or pattern. A lot of disturbance runs, a lot of welfare checks, nature's unknown. Part of that too is we're working to refine what those calls actually are as they come to us from dispatch, because sometimes dispatch gets a very limited amount of information, so they have to use their best judgment and pick and choose. And Captain Pedigo would talk about this a little bit. Beginning at noon today, we went into a new system which will help categorize those calls. Brian, you want to talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. So state law changed, and as of January 1, 2024, all dispatch centers are required to have protocols in place for the different disciplines that they dispatch. So we already had fire and EMS was already using, it's called ProQA is the company we went with, but they were already using the protocols. We had not implemented the law enforcement protocols yet. They went live today at noon. So basically what it is it prompts the dispatcher or the call taker to ask specific questions related to what it is that's being reported. Like if someone calls in and says, for example, I was just robbed, they immediately start typing robbery, and then it brings up already scripted questions that they then read to the caller and then answer. And as they answer, it can take them down different kind of different ways to get information, such as if they can give suspect information, weapon information, or something like that for weapons involved, injuries involved. So it makes sure that we're trying to gather the most information to make sure that we're sending the correct amount of resources there. The unfortunate part is it requires callers to provide a pretty fair amount of information. Sometimes callers don't really want to do that, and they're not overly happy about asking several questions. But the purpose of it is so that we are ensuring that we are sending the correct resources and the correct amount of resources to each different call for service. So those went live today. Like I said, it is required by state law that all dispatch centers have protocols in place by January 1, 2024, so we just got to jump on it.
And they'll all have the same protocol? It's a state mandated protocol, or you developed your own?
We went with a company that's,
I see.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Fire did the most research into this, but it's probably the most widely used company that provides these dispatching protocols, and it works with our CAD. So it automatically dumps into the call screen so that either fire or ambulance or officers now can see all of the answers to each question asked and provides them with more information. So the other hope is that it will kind of standardize the dispatching and potentially speed up the training of new dispatchers, because it tells them what questions to ask. They don't have to basically be taught that experience to know.
So of this number,
Is this represent all calls to 911, or is it only calls that the police respond to?
This is our, just BPD alone.
Just BPD
Not
alone?
sheriff, not anybody else.
Okay, and then could you maybe break down for us like what, how to say this well? I think maybe give us a sense of the sort of range of different calls that you can receive, right? Because I think for a lot of people, when we see calls going up, and we also know how short-staffed the police are, right? And so, you know, the immediate response that I would have, that I've had the last couple of meetings, right, when we see this number, is I'm like, okay, concern number one, crime's going way up, right? But we see on the next slide, that's not true, right? And so then my second concern is, okay, your workload's going way up.
The workload is going way up, and not to interrupt.
Yes, sir, no, go on.
This can range anywhere from a parking complaint
Uh-huh,
to murder.
uh-huh,
They all come through 911.
right,
From a traffic stop to a plane crash.
right,
Anything that we're involved in is represented in that 38,000
right.
that we would generate some type of record of.
And then what if a person calls multiple times? Does that also count there?
Oh, yeah.
And then what if?
Now, what doesn't count is if you have multiple callers on the same event.
Okay, okay.
Because you may very well get a traffic accident that was witnessed by 10 people.
And 10 people call,
And
right, okay.
30 people go by it. Of those 40 people that have either witnessed it or gone by it, 10 decide to call.
Uh-huh.
That's still just one call for us.
Okay, okay.
Now, what this also doesn't represent, this is the singular call.
Uh-huh.
This is not the manpower that we've devoted to that.
Right,
Most of our calls, the vast majority of them, are 2 or more cars per call.
right,
So some of these are 1-car calls.
Yeah.
So one officer went.
yeah,
The vast majority, probably the 70th plus percentile, will be 2 and more cars. You know, we've had calls that we've been on just within the last few days that have had 8, 9 cars at it.
right, right.
So,
And then the other point, and I'm getting slightly ahead, so I'll ask the question and we can put a pin in it till we get to that point. But in the packet, there's a graph on nuisance calls later on, and we mentioned that when we take away nuisance calls, that still is a really high number. But when I'm looking at nuisance calls for this month, we had like 300 nuisance calls, right? So we're still talking about like 6,000 calls a month, right?
Well,
on average.
yes, absolutely. And I think that's the next slide, so let's
Right.
talk about it. Again, right now with the way that dispatch is in flux, we're having some problem quantifying exactly what the call is on the way in.
Right.
They are just that busy that a lot of times they don't have the time to really drill down to find out what is the actual issue here. So they, for want of a better word, have 2 or 3 different call types that those calls just get dumped into.
Okay.
That's their best quick guess. And we even created another call type called Nature Unknown, where I don't know, but they're screaming for the police. So that it gives the officer an understanding of something's going on here that requires our presence,
Okay.
but the dispatcher really can't tell us what it is.
So
Now, it may boil down to a drunk, somebody who's drunk and causing a problem.
Right,
It
right,
could be
right.
they just witnessed a car crash and
Right.
it's horrific and they're screaming about it. But like you have disturbance here, that's one call type.
Right.
Intoxication is a call type, vandalism, but it could have been a welfare check, it could have been a disturbance run, it could have been a fight in progress that aren't categorized on these necessarily because they're just under the disturbance tag.
Right.
So what you and I would think of as disturbance anecdotally
Right,
may not
right.
get categorized that on dispatch.
Right, okay, okay.
Just another question, is there any, this probably falls under the no rhyme or reason category, but, I feel like there's more people out and about in Bloomington than there were last summer. Do you think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just more activity?
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of more people doing
Return
whatever?
to pre-COVID
Yeah.
norms, yeah.
Okay.
And that's part of our increase in traffic stops is now that we're not so worried about getting the officers infected, they're back in their normal cycle of trying to effort places. We've had a lot of traffic crashes. Going after the violent crime, as we promised you that we would, results in a lot of traffic stops. So those things increase with time. We're going back to pre-COVID activity levels.
But
And
the
people
numbers you're seeing exceed pre-COVID levels, is that right?
much
Yes, so
Yes, yeah.
that's sort of the
concern.
question you're
Yeah.
wrestling with.
Yeah. So we can't put a tab on why.
Just your hunch or your instinct, do you think that you're getting more social welfare calls?
No.
No, it's,
No, that would be somewhat explainable. what's inexplainable or inexplicable to all of us is the fact that it's not one or two categories that have just shot up where you can effort that problem and bring it back down. It seems like a nominal rise across the board. And that's the concern as to how did that happen all of a sudden. It's not rare for us to see a spike in something or other for a given time, and then you apply more resources, and it typically comes back down to levels that you're used to. Again, gentlemen, chime in. This is across the board.
Do you, in your interactions with other county police departments, are other counties seeing a similar, or cities seeing a similar?
Some, but not to
pattern?
this degree, not to this
Interesting, huh?
size.
Okay.
You know, you always get the quote-unquote summer spike, but we're just now into what we really categorize as the second month of summer. So even if you took out June and even part of May, we were still in the mid-30s, 40s and that was some cold days.
Yeah.
You know, that led up to that. If we have an explanation, we'd be glad to tell you, because we would be doing something to address it. But what's even more concerning is we're seeing that rise with fewer and fewer officers.
When we talk about dispatch, you talked about how the dispatch is in a little bit of disarray. Is that because of not having enough people in dispatch? What's sort of the resource issue there?
We just had a policy board meeting this morning, and I believe the latest number was 11.
11
There are
dispatchers?
11 dispatchers short right now. There's
11 short, okay.
4 start next week. But the time that it takes to train a dispatcher is pretty intense. And so
Right.
I think it's up to somewhere around 7 to 8 months before they can sit in a seat by themselves and be completely competent as a
Right.
dispatcher on their own.
Right.
And when you have this insane, I guess I would say, increase the number of calls that are coming into the dispatch center, it's nonstop. The amount of, I think, this morning, they reported that there's been an increase of like 30,000 telephone calls that they have had to either receive or call out on this year. And it's just the number of people that are calling to report either crimes or just, general welfare checks or disturbances or things like that. It's just skyrocketing.
And it's not just us, it's fire department, it's the ambulance service.
Right, which yeah,
I mean,
right.
as we track along during a day, normally it goes on a computer dispatch screen. At the end of the day, we all tend to look at it.
Yeah.
And we were typically in the 300 to 400 level, for calls for countywide.
Across the board.
Across the board, and generally 60 to 70% of those are ours.
And this was this is normal, or
last
this is,
year or two.
Okay.
Now we're ending the night at right at 500.
Right.
To give you an idea, it's 6 p.m. now, and we're at call 320 for the day.
And usually we
Right.
weren't hitting that until 10
Right.
o'clock.
Yeah.
So
And-
so across the county, we're getting what, like 15,000 calls a month is like the average right now.
Probably close to it. It's going to vary day to day, month to month.
Wow. So you said there were 4 categories that they're currently, when it comes to police, that they're categorized in. Those are the
Oh, no, there's more than 4. There's
Oh,
Just
okay.
specifically for the nuisance type calls.
Oh,
Just as
okay.
an
Those are
example.
just for nuisance. Okay.
So, yeah, so like those 4 that the deputy chief's talking about, disturbance, intoxication, vandalism, and nature unknown, those are sort of the quick hits, if you will, that dispatch is like, we don't know what's going on, it's a disturbance, it's a nature unknown.
Okay. But so I guess the question that I'm trying to understand, I'm sorry to ask so many questions about this, but the question that I'm trying to understand is when you talked about the change that's happened this month, are we changing the way that we're changing, as I understand it, we're changing the way that we're collecting data, right? So this is going to we'll have a more automatic sort of way of saying, this was what all the calls were. Because my understanding is that currently we're bucketing them, but we're not doing it.
You're always going to bucket
well,
them.
or-
This is going to standardize the questions that are asked of that bucket.
Okay, so then why? I guess the pointed question is, why can't you tell us what each of the calls have been if you currently are sorting them anyways?
Well, because what we're doing now is dispatch has to give their best guess on what they're intaking. What we have just started to do, because of that exact nature of getting good data, is now the officers, as they clear the call, as they leave the call, or having to put in what they actually observed. So it may have come in as a fight in progress.
Okay.
But when the officers get there, it's not a fight in progress, it was an argument.
Uh-huh.
So that
And
becomes
that
something different.
changes, right,
Or
right.
it came in as an argument, when they got there was a fight in progress.
Right.
So then it changes that call, so over a period of time, we'll have more accurate data,
That makes sense.
which will help them refine out the questions they're asking, and will help them refine out what bucket they're putting these in as you term it, before it's dispatched.
Yes, sir. And so my last question, and then I will hold my peace, is when we think about resources, I mean, so if we, as the Board of Public Safety, were to make recommendations, you know, to the mayor or to the city council on things that are needed, bless you, are things that are needed to address particularly this issue or understanding this issue, what would those resources be?
I think that's a question we'll leave for the chief to answer for you.
Okay.
I mean, because all it's a matter of priorities.
Uh-huh.
What we're doing here tonight, not to beg,
Yes, sir.
forgiveness for not answering it, is we're kind of presenting what we're seeing.
Uh-huh.
I don't know
Right.
that there's necessarily good data yet to put your finger on anything that we should spend money on this or this or this.
But I guess to me it's about, is there a way, like, what's keeping us from having the good data?
Well, it is that good data because things are just coming so fast at this point
I see.
that they can't spend so long on the phone, frankly, that they used to be able to do.
I see.
Well, and I think also something important to understand is when a call comes in, a caller might have just driven by something.
Uh-huh.
They don't know what happened.
Uh-huh.
It might come in as, I don't know what it is, looked like there was two guys arguing, so it goes in as a disturbance call.
Uh-huh.
When we get there, and actually the reason they were arguing is it was a robbery.
Uh-huh.
So the officer's gonna clear that call with a robbery.
Right.
But the person calling had very little information, and all they said was, I don't know, looked like two guys arguing, I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they aren't going to, even if they ask 15 questions, the person's gonna say, I don't know, I just drove by and saw two guys arguing, looked like they were about to fight, looked like they needed the police. And that's gonna be the only information they're gonna be able to provide dispatch. So even with questions, I mean, the data is not, it's never gonna be perfect from the intake part of that, because a lot of callers that call us don't know what, and say like a welfare check, there's a man laying along the roadway, and they want the welfare check, a welfare check complete on the person. We get there and the person's intoxicated. Well, that actually then, as the officer would clear, they would change that nature to intoxicated. So it wouldn't be a welfare check any longer, but again, it's someone that drives by and they say, I don't know what's wrong with him, he's just laying there.
Right.
Someone needs to check him.
Right.
So that's why the information, there's always gonna be a disparity between what's entered by dispatch and what's actually occurring, but we're trying to identify where the calls are that we might be able to ask some better questions on
Right.
to maybe get that at least a little bit better.
Thank you.
So back to the screen, you see the normal distribution. A lot of disturbance runs in this category. Again, we've talked about why there may be things outside this that would fall in the same category but didn't. This is the year-to-date crime totals. You'll notice that there is a decrease in a lot of the categories, which is kind of counterintuitive when you see the call volume going up.
Exactly.
But there are some preventative things going on that we're hoping keeps some of it down.
And the 2021, 2022, are those year totals or are those year-to-date?
Year-to-date.
So 3 is how many we had in June
Right.
of 2022.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because if we just gave you the year as a whole, there's no way to quantify,
Right,
are we doing
right,
better
right.
or worse? Now, keep in mind, this could all change tomorrow morning.
Exactly.
You know, hope it doesn't, but this is where we're trending right now. Traffic stops, again, we're going back to pre-COVID levels. We've got some people in training, and we're trying to dedicate some places to some high accident areas, see if we can bring those back down. Calls involving weapons, again, you're seeing a decrease here. We really hope that continues. Arrests have gone down, which not by much, 7. But again, like we've talked before, these are cyclical. They are up for the entire year, and we'll see how it goes for the rest of the year. Typically, we see a big spike beginning in August, September, October, again, because the population of the city will increase.
And do you think it's strange that the gap in arrest is so much smaller than the gap in crime? Because crime has gone down, I think, significantly
Or
across
did
the
the
board.
arrests mitigate the crime going up?
Okay,
Did the arrest at a lower level mitigate the crime occurring at a higher level?
I see.
A good example is, did somebody get arrested for public intoxication
I
that
see.
didn't then later get involved in a fight?
I see. So you might have, in the statistics in the other year, somebody might have been counted as committing multiple crimes type of thing.
No, these
that
are just
would've-
people that got arrested,
Right.
whereas the crimes are the actual crimes
Oh, I
itself.
see. So there could be a crime. A crime could happen without an arrest.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Juveniles again went up this month, although you're seeing a big swing for very small numbers. We did have one hate crime during this reporting period, which ended June. That was a male downtown that got in a fight. It was an anti-Asian bias crime that was reported to the federal government as that, and there was an arrest made in it. Quick highlights on training hours. 668.65 hours. You can read down through. There's 2 of them went through their probationary officer training course, an officer attended an accident reconstruction course. 2 sergeants attended their basically leadership course, police leadership academy course, emergency vehicle operations course, survival and traffic stop course. You had the third officers in their training, CDU in theirs, both canines in their training hours for the month, and crisis negotiation had training hours as well. I did put it on this slide. Police social workers had 28 referrals during the month, but 321 contacts. They are quite busy doing what they do so well. And I think that's it for statistics.
Great.
Thank you for the updated statistics, by the way. I love it's really useful.
Hopefully.
General business?
General business. Well, we'll come back to personnel. Just want to make sure, the chief wanted us to be sure that you had no questions or comments on what he had sent you regarding the electronic control weapons, the tasers.
I did send one question, but you got that.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm not privy to that, so the chief
Okay.
will have to answer that privately.
Do you know what the next steps are?
As we laid out in the document he sent forward to us, we're going to move forward with, quite frankly, the finances.
Okay.
Find out what it's going to cost us and begin that process, which, as you well know, purchasing the city is a process. So that process will move forward. And again, as it's laid out in the document, then we'll look at procurement time. I'm not sure what their lead time is now. Typically, it's been 60 to 90 days, although during COVID, we were obviously seeing much longer delivery times on things. And then it will move forward as he laid out with procurement, training, issuance, and then the testing phase.
I was just one. I said this to the chief, but I think it would be very useful because they brought it to us, and it's somewhat outside of our purview in terms of approving anything. I mean, they were asking for our general views on it. I think it would be very useful for the sake of transparency, to then say what those views were, right? To show how they've been reflected in the document. Because like I talked to the chief for a good, almost an hour on the issues. So I think it would just be useful to be able to say, hey, this is what the Board of Public Safety thought about this, and maybe if you wanted us to write a report or something like that, I'd be happy to, I don't know if that's within our things to do, Chris.
There's nothing wrong with providing feedback to the chief if the chief asked for information from the board as to how it viewed a certain topic. We have done things like that in the past, so providing some form of a report to the chief would be fine on the matter.
Just so people can see it. If they, just because we're bringing it up again, and we've talked about it in the forum, and then also talked individually about it. So I just think transparency would be useful there.
So for example, if we got answers to some of the questions you raised, I had some questions building on your questions too, actually. Then we sort of summarized them in one place, so if
Exactly.
anyone else had the same question.
Yeah, and I had some concerns about the design of the sort of pilot period, and just making sure that we're doing it scientifically right, doing it the right way, being clear about what we're actually trying to measure, being clear about the things that we're concerned about up front. So I think that including all of that sort of verbiage to say, hey, we've talked to the Board of Public Safety, these were the concerns, and this is how we've then changed what we're doing. If it is the case that we've changed what we're doing, if it's the case that we've heard and we're just carrying on with what was already proposed, that's outside of our ability to do anything about it, but.
Right, and I think those are, again, you've all had the private discussions with the chief, and I don't want to intrude on those, so I'll leave those discussions between you and the chief.
Yes, sir.
He is clearly very approachable with this, and we want to be
Absolutely.
above board with it, which is why we
Absolutely.
publish the
Exactly.
documents to you.
Exactly.
We're following along with, quite frankly, mimicking every other agency that went
Mhm.
before us.
Yep.
That way, we're not trying to, reinvent the wheel, and we're also not straying away from the known quantities that we are able to collect.
Right, exactly. Thank you so much.
All right. Other than that, general business, we'll move on to expenditures and procurements. You will continue to see as they trickle in, bills for vehicles for building vehicles as far as installing emergency equipment. You will see bills for some canine equipment that we need for transportation. You will see a bill, you won't see that bill, but there's a bill for a small surgery one of the dogs needs that you're going to see go through, just preventative medicine. And that should be about it, other than the normal replacement cycle for body armor, things like that. And are you ready to move to personnel? Captain Pedigo?
Sure. Personnel, we're still 21 officers short. However, we did recently start a hiring process, which we are to, most of those in the process are in the background investigation stage now, so they have investigators that are just beginning to look into their backgrounds and make sure that they're a quality candidate for us. We do have one more interview on Thursday with an applicant that was at military training when we did the rest of the interviews, so we will interview her on Thursday and then make the determination as whether or not she'll go forward into backgrounds as well based upon information learned there.
So how many do you have going through that phase at this point?
There's
Of the
4
21?
that were assigned for background actually today,
Mhm.
and then I'm not sure on the one last applicant until after we do our interview. So it's possible we'll have 5. I am still working with our talent acquisition specialist. I know that he attended the Indy Black Expo this past weekend on behalf of BPD and said he made some good contacts there. So we're hopeful that we might see some applicants that might come from their discussions with him there. The dispatch social worker hiring process is still ongoing. We have narrowed it down to 4 applicants. We're right now making a determination as to whether or not they have the proper level of education that's required to be in that position, and then we will be scheduling interviews with them in the near future. So I would say we will probably be doing, depending upon how we can work it into schedules, probably be doing interviews on those within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Along with all that, we have 2 officers, both supervisors on long-term sick leave or light duty. I don't have any type of return date for them. And that should be it under personnel.
Speedy
Thank you.
recovery.
And then for certain deployment, there were no ARB deployments during this month.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions?
I just have one other thing that I think relates to the data point is that I've been thinking a lot about this question that we ask. Again, within our purview, we don't have much power here or anything we can do, but I just think we could bring ideas, right? And I think, this question, we started last week talking about why we think maybe some people haven't taken some of the incentives, why some of those haven't caught on, in terms of us catching up with our employment issues. And I think there may be another data collection point here of really understanding, why are people leaving the force? Why are people wanting to join the force? We know some of the high level things, right? Salary, like there's the obvious big things, and then also how we're actually rolling out some of these incentives. I think the chief brought up last week, but I'd be really interested in helping if there's anything we can do to better understand, what's motivating or not motivating folks to, join the force, and in the absence of that, like what can we do to better support the force to be more agile or change, in the sort of face of these, changing environment. But,
Certainly. We appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is fire department business, and starting with the report.
Oops, not that. Okay.
Well, you can see our operational stats here, where our calls, rescue EMSs are still inconsistently our largest category. Our call volume overall went up a little, right, from June to July, but we're less than what's green 2021. So. But overall, our call volume is still, we're on track to have a very big year. And no real big significant calls during June. I think we had one fire call overall. If I go into, these are response times and goals and percentiles. I know it has a percentage time, but percentage and percentile are different. When we talk about the 0 over there in the total response force, we had one structure fire and one engine did not make it there within 8 minutes. So when you have one fire, one person doesn't make it to the party, you get a 0, right? So, but our response times, we're consistently doing better those, at least for EMS first arriving, and then the goal there is 4 minutes. And for other, which is the bottom right-hand corner, the arrival time is, the goal is 5 minutes, 300 seconds. So, any questions with any of those?
Because I'm like the data visualization guy, right? I think it would be so useful to also put in the year to date. So it's like this is the month, and then you also have the cumulative, because I think, as you note, sometimes when you just look at these, it's kind of like shocking, right? And
it is. Like I said,
right.
And I did on my own, because I've been playing with this.
Right.
You mentioned it last month. Did a bar graph for this. So I've done January for all those. They all have their own bar graph, right?
Awesome.
And they are up and down and up and down. It doesn't seem to be trending to anything that makes sense.
Right.
Like 1 month, somebody would be in the 80 percentile, but in April they were at 40, and I'm like, I don't know what. There's nothing I can put a finger on it.
Right.
Or it could be a minute difference, right? Because you could be a
And
minute
it's
later
seconds,
and then you're
right?
late. Okay.
Yeah, and so when we look at percentiles, right, we're looking at, this is our goal. If the goal is a minute 20 seconds to get on the truck, thanks for that, Doug, but a minute 20, but at 3, it doesn't take into consideration the time of day. So you have a minute and 20 seconds, whether it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. Well, historically, it takes us a little bit longer at night to get on the truck than it does at 3 in the afternoon, ideally, right? It also, when you're looking at the minute 20, if somebody has a 5 second, because they're already in the rig because they were responding to another call, that 5 seconds is way off the percentile,
Yes,
right? So it's a relationship between the goal and how many times you hit it, and when you're away from it, how far are you away from that goal? Does that make sense? So, I do averages too. If you guys want to see averages, that's why I put that out for the crew, saying who's the fastest average on the truck and who's the slowest. I'm trying to motivate. Nobody wants to be the last one out the door, right? Somebody has to be.
Are you concerned about any of these?
I don't. The ISO, the insurance service, the 0, right there, total response force. Once we had a fire earlier this year, we went back, couldn't log it. Well, the CAD was down and there was no time for the aerial getting on scene.
Right.
They need 2 engines and an aerial to meet that number. So that is, to me, that's an important number. So especially when there's, a fire, we want all the proper resources there.
Yes. Thank you.
Training education hours, as you can see, we met our goal for the month and take into consideration that we did add several new people. So we've had 18 hires since the middle of June. So the last 2 for this group start on Monday, the 24th. So we did have one postpone their hire date because of a family emergency, and basically will be on the list for for hiring for 2024. So overall, out of the 21 spots, we'll have 20. So, yes, the crews can't wait. So. Our MIH wins for our mobile integrated healthcare, we've seen that the number of active clients, we're fully staffed now with 4 MIHs, or mobile integrated healthcare personnel, the community EMTs. So we have 33 active clients. Their average visit is 6.8 per patient. So when we talk about services engaged, we're referring to, did they need assistance with rental or medicine or food, did they have food insecurity issues, and then the agencies engaged, there might be a trustee's office, or it might be an in-house, like prevention might go install smoke detectors. So it's different agencies, and Area 10 is a big one, so all those different agencies, and we have those. We look at the 911 calls diverted. This is, you see the first one, first MIH win. We diverted 2 911 calls. Simply another agency was already on site. They wanted a medical assessment. MIHs went there and said twice, they said, this is not a life-threatening emergency. You don't need a 911 call for this. However, the third one is the second one. They were in there for an interview for a patient-client visit, and she was having a cardiac event while they were there, called 911 and was admitted to the hospital. So big win for that. And then the third one, we unhoused patient, we've got them primary care and other services. Now they're on housing list, so just helping people out with what's needed and improving their quality of life. So, and then 16 referrals from other agencies. And when we run through those referrals, everyone that's new active client, new active referral, we run them through our database. Are they a super user? So I go back 90 days. How many times have we been to an address? And our crews are doing a fantastic proactive job that they're on the scene, noticing maybe they need something, they put a referral into it. Just contact the MIH and they'll go and make contact. And so we're not really seeing the super users per se anymore. We're nipping that in the bud. So I'd like to say we're taking a lot of 911 calls off the plate just by doing that, but that was a very hard number to track. So that's just projected. So
What was that extremely high number in January?
that was a year-to-date from December holdover. So when we first
okay.
started, year-to-date was 52. We were taking everything that we had at that point, and that's where we had residents where we were going 3-4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And now that MIHs are checking on those people, that's weekly, they're not calling 911 3 times a week.
Right.
They're just going and checking on, did you need anything? How are you doing? What can we do? So it been with them when they've actually asked, how are you doing? And they're, okay, well, if your wife's gonna come home, maybe we should get somebody in here to help clean up the house before she comes home because it's not ready for a wheelchair or a walker or whatever the case may be, right? So they help them get with that particular service to come in and do that. And then the crews occasionally ask, how are they doing? We haven't been there in a long time, right? You're not going because the MIHs are going. Okay, we do have one, okay? I didn't make the quote, this was on the card, right? And it came from the library. We worked with the library to do their mulching for them. It was a community project day, so basically everybody who was on duty, well, not everybody, but admin, we went, and 2 crews came out and we moved tons, I swear it was tons of mulch around the library. So that was just a community project day, but it took 3 different dates between the weather and personnel to get it to come in, so yeah. I didn't pick the quote.
I go to the library almost every single day,
Yeah.
or at least the kids portion of the library,
Right.
and I saw everyone out there working,
Oh,
and it
did
was great.
you?
I didn't wanna bother you, but.
Well, thanks, because we were probably just all really sweaty messes, and we probably would have nothing. Well, we were sweaty by the end of it, it was a good day. And then general business, I'll leave to interim deputy chief Litwin.
Regarding general business, I'm in information absorbing mode right now, so as I acquire more of that, I'll better be able to relay it.
Literally drinking from the fire.
Yes. Having said that, I believe all the expenditures are ongoing projects that have been discussed at previous meetings. Nothing new to report at this point. With personnel, we currently have 0 on any type of long-term sick or FMLA. We have 2 on intermittent parental leave, so they are approaching using up the remainder of what they have left, but they've been good about having babies and projecting their time to most appropriately bond with them, so that's been good for them. Regarding our staffing, as of right now, we are down 3 people, 1 chauffeur and 2 firefighters, and on the 24th of July, we'll have 2 more coming on, making us down 1. And of those, we have 18 in recruit training. So they're gonna come on in batches. Each batch that comes on to shift has helped a little bit more, with the largest batch coming on in, I believe, projected November. So that'll make a big difference with our scheduling. And yeah, I believe that covers it. Nothing else pertinent regarding personnel issues.
Is there a ceremony or something similar when the batches finish training or?
Reservation.
We did a swearing in for the 4 who already certified, who came on just a couple weeks ago, before they went on shift. We do try to do that, swearing in. It involves the clerk in the mayor's office, and then, so we have the 4 that we just did, a week and a half ago, and then 14 or so of these the recruits are in EMT class right now.
Hard one.
Yes, this is the hard exam, right? Harder, like, it's passing the National Registry exam is the tricky part. But some of them already have their fire certs. So once they obtain their EMT, then they're gonna look at doing this accelerated certified process, and we'll have to look at those, see how many of those will actually proceed with that. So we won't have a number or a projected date. I was guesstimating late September, but that's just me personally, so I'm not speaking for the training division.
When that happens, we'll love to see it. Congratulations.
That's a fun one, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'd love
to
to
have
see
it.
it.
And then and then when the 11 other ones come on late November, that's the big, because they will have gone through all the fire training and the EMT.
Thank you. Any other items of discussion?
Do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll move to old business,
We don't have any.
new business.
We don't have any.
I guess, is there anyone here who wants to make a petition or communication, public communication?
There's no
We'll
public
make the 3
present.
minutes, okay. All right, I guess we're ready to adjourn then. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We are.
Thank you.